In this video, we delve into the enigmatic world of the Ice Age survivors and progenitors of modern Europeans, known for their stunning cave paintings and vanquishing of the Neanderthals. They hunted animals several times their size and were occasionally hunted by them as they struggled to survive in a world covered in snow and ice. They sketched mammoths, bison, and deer on the cavern walls with flickering firelight, leaving vivid images that still capture our imaginations 35,000 years later. Who were the Cro-Magnons, as they were once known to archaeologists? They were the earliest anatomically modern humans in Europe, to put it simply. Their hunter-gatherer culture, an ancient precursor to the society we live in today, existed for millennia in isolated regions of Ice Age Europe. With a frozen environment, dangerous predators and a competing human species called the Neanderthals, Cro Magnon was one of the earliest known examples of advanced human culture. The versatility possessed by Cro-Magnons is what has made humans an unrivaled success as a species. These Ice Age people survived and thrived with only simple tools while living on a frozen continent. While other human species vanished during the Ice Age, they survived, and experts are still baffled as to why. Modern humans have colonized the whole globe since our species first emerged about 300,000 years ago, equipped with the capacity to adapt to our surroundings. Furthermore, by examining stalagmites from 2 Romanian caves, researchers were able to reconstruct the climate of prehistoric Central Europe. They found that the area saw 2 episodes of exceptionally low temperatures, even by Ice Age standards, around the time that Neanderthal numbers in what was once their homeland began to decline and finally vanished from the fossil record. The scientists came to the conclusion that these periods probably dealt a fatal 1-2 punch to Neanderthals, with humans only being responsible, at most, for settling in the areas once occupied by the extinct hominins, by comparing their geological findings with archaeological evidence. According to the growing picture, it's possible that Neanderthals and humans coexisted between the 2 cold times, albeit not in the same locations but in a nearby region where they may have encountered each other and interbred. In fact, the DNA analysis of one of the oldest Homo sapiens skeletons in Europe, also discovered in Romania and dating to around 40,000 years ago, revealed that this person's ancestors had interbred with Neanderthals between 4 and 6 generations earlier, indicating that there must have still been Neanderthals present to exchange DNA with. But by the end of the second period, just Homo sapiens remained in Europe. Even if a small number of Neanderthals did endure the second cold snap, they would have been soon assimilated into the much bigger Homo sapiens groupings. Anthropocentrism is the belief that modern human beings are the central or most important entity on Earth, and some refer to the concept as human supremacy or human exceptionalism. Indeed, in addition to having the natural ability to endure a variety of temperatures, Homo sapiens can also withstand periods of extreme climate change. Humans were able to endure the extreme weather changes that their hominid predecessors could not endure during the Ice Age, which began roughly 115,000 years ago. How did these people manage to survive? Presently, anthropologists and archaeologists are without a conclusive solution. However, the hazy hypotheses and speculative explanations frequently highlight our species' outstanding social skills and propensity for modifying our environment to our advantage. It's critical to comprehend what people were up against, in order to comprehend how they endured and adapted during the Ice Age. The planet's surface and atmosphere cool through protracted periods known as ice ages, covering large areas of the planet's surface with glacier and continental ice. Despite the common misconception that these times are always frozen, ice ages are really marked by regular climate swings as the temperatures swing between frigid and colder. In fact, the so-called Ice Age, which lasted from 115,000 to 11,700 years ago, was marked by extraordinary climate instability. The past 100,000 years also have seen a great oscillation of both cold and warm temperatures in the higher latitudes, as well as wet and dry conditions in the lower latitudes. All species must address the fundamental challenge of how to survive the change as a result of the planet's dynamic. Many plant and animal species suffered major consequences as a result of the climate, and they had a difficult time adjusting to the sudden changes in their environment. The problem was undoubtedly the same for hominins, and we were not the only hominins around at the start of the Ice Age. The Indonesian islands were home to the last survivors of the long-lived Homo erectus and the short-statured Homo floresiensis. Asia was populated by Denisovans, and the Neanderthals were able to endure the harsh winters of Europe. These species, our closest evolutionary relatives, had previously flourished, but in the middle of the Ice Age, they completely disappeared from the archaeological record. Why? There are many theories out there, but there is probably no one explanation that applies to all cases. One widely accepted explanation postulates that these hominin species perished when a more intelligent hominin species, our own, appeared in their habitats and subdued them through violence and/or the appropriation of food. Suspicions regarding the spread of Homo sapiens, around the time when all of these other species went extinct, are heightened when people consider the historical acts of violence committed by humanity, including members of our own species. People will therefore believe that our species wiped off the competition, even if there is scant evidence to support this. A popular argument today claims that the abrupt climatic changes of the time period were a factor in the extinction of these populations. Despite having numerous biological and behavioral adaptations to the cold, recent research suggests that several abrupt cold and arid periods between 44,000 and 40,000 years ago destroyed the Neanderthals. The link between climate and death is rather obvious. Eventually, it becomes too cold for them to locate food, and they freeze to death. According to some academics, demographic changes may have made climate and food supply swings worse. According to other research, the Neanderthals kept their populations so tiny and precarious that any risks to their capacity to procreate, whether attributable to the climate or another factor, became nearly insurmountable. Scientists are still unable to determine the precise sizes of these hominin groups, and estimates vary by numerous orders of magnitude. However, although being ready to change their theories, paleoanthropologists are increasingly turning to demographics to explain these Ice Age extinctions. Extinctions can happen for a variety of causes, and even when populations are minimal, species don't necessarily go extinct. Our own species survived and stayed somewhat dispersed throughout the time, indicating that there are likely more factors at work. Hominins virtually all vanished during the Ice Age. Only one species persisted. But Homo sapiens had been present on the continent of Africa for at least 200,000 years before the Ice Age. This was in many ways a fortunate location. About 2 million years into our development, the Ice Age finally arrived, but this region stayed isolated from the full intensity of glacial activity that other hominins elsewhere had to deal with. Nevertheless, somewhere between 70,000 and 60,000 years ago, in the middle of the Ice Age, our species began to disperse over the globe for unknown causes. We traveled through lush forests and bleak, scorching deserts. They were simply traveling to the next valley and hillside to see what was there, and some of them traveled quite a distance, because they lacked a map. These explorers eventually arrived in Europe's iciest glacial settings, which the cold-adapted Neanderthals had tried to escape. In the end, our predecessors lived in a variety of environments, and dealt with the unpredictable cycles of climatic change that took place in each. Given their shared cultural traits, it is puzzling that they accomplished this achievement as other hominins disappeared from the archaeological record. The ancestors of all hominins shared a set of survival techniques and tools. They lived in intricate social groupings. They also exchanged information with one another, came up with creative solutions to challenges, and created and used specialized tools. We didn't possess a trait that these extinct hominins lacked. The issue is how we applied those skills differently. The ability of early humans to survive is best demonstrated by the fact that they were signaling and communicating with each other differently. It's almost clear that all hominins were able to communicate in some way, notwithstanding experts' historical speculation that our species is the only one capable of speech. Some experts even hypothesize that protolinguistic skills may have existed in early hominins like Homo erectus. In addition, new research indicates that Neanderthals may have had auditory and verbal capacities on par with modern humans. Despite this, our capacity for communication appears to be significantly greater than that of our nearest relatives. Early Homo sapiens may have had greater vocal flexibility as a result of their anatomical makeup, which allowed them to communicate complex information about the local environment, including flora and fauna and shifting climate conditions, through a variety of languages. Indeed, the weight of the data suggests that Homo sapiens have a greater capacity for manipulating the complexity of sounds. Finer vocal control contributes to cultural and behavioral diversity and, thus, the capacity to figure out different things in different places. Additionally, experts assert that Homo sapiens, more so than any other animal, expressed their sense of social identity through symbolic acts including rituals, ornamentation of the body, and art. This cultural solidarity and symbolism made it easier for tribes to get together and form extensive social relationships outside of their local groups. These links served as a backup plan in case of emergency. For example, a population in one location could seek assistance from its neighbors if climate change, or any other problem caused that population to struggle. You would have allies somewhere who could aid you in surviving if conditions were severe where you are. Experts emphasize that social identities were also developed by other hominins, particularly the Neanderthals. The archaeological record increasingly suggests that these people produced straightforward symbolic items, while they were less skilled at forging helpful social connections. The Neanderthals were really good at surviving in their local settings, but they didn't seem to have the kind of long-distance social connections that allowed Homo sapiens to overcome all difficulties if circumstances weren't favorable where they were at any particular moment. The ability to change our environment, notably through the conception and creation of complex tools, may have been another trait that helped people live through the Ice Age. Homo sapiens was not the only creature capable of creating sharp edges and flakes. That said, they planned and disseminated their technology deliberately, a procedure that may have been influenced by their communication skills, and as a result, produced significant advances in toolmaking. In fact, the variety and creativity of stone tools among Homo sapiens are far greater than anything the Neanderthals ever created. Although there is no general agreement among academics, toolmaking may have had a significant impact on our species' capacity for adaptation. Our ability to change things is really our survival tool. When you look at the first stone tool, you can see that the environment has changed. Pick up a stone and adapt it, and all of a sudden you have tools with sharp edges and hammering surfaces. That establishes the framework for the longevity of our species. Technology can provide answers to questions such as where to get food, when to locate food, and how to handle challenges of survival. Humans survived in refugial areas along the southern boundaries of the European continent as the climate dropped, and Central Europe became inhospitable during the Ice Age, which began around 125,000 years ago. The environment fluctuated between lengthy cold stages and brief warm episodes throughout the ensuing 60,000 years. According to pollen studies, the continent's forests, which had been covered during the warm periods, were soon replaced by a shrub-filled grassland during the cold phases. However, sites with Neanderthal artifacts vanish from the archaeological record between 43,000 and 40,000 years ago, to be replaced by the Aurignacian culture, which is characterized by artifacts such as stone tools, prehistoric art, and even musical instruments, attributed to the modern human species, Homo sapiens. Scientists were able to reconstruct the climate in Central and Eastern Europe between 44,000 and 40,000 years ago, by examining the chemical characteristics of yearly deposited layers of stalagmites from two caves in contemporary Romania. Around 125,000 years ago, a decline in global temperatures signaled the start of the latest Ice Age. Then around 70,000 to 60,000 years ago, the climate briefly stabilized and warmed up once more. When the vast ice shields covering North America began to melt 50,000 years ago as a result of a warming climate, a significant amount of fresh water entered the Atlantic Ocean, slowing the ocean currents, most likely. Due to the crucial role those currents play in bringing warm water and air to Europe, the continent saw a chaotic sequence of cooling episodes punctuated by brief dry pulses. The examined cave deposits reveal two distinct cooling periods that occurred 44,000 to 43,000 years ago, and 40,800 to 40,200 years ago. Additionally, Europe's climate was also much drier up to 42,000 years ago. As a result, the majority of the continent's forests were swiftly replaced by grassland. Before this stage, the last remnants of Neanderthals are found. Any indications of human activity completely vanish during the cold and dry phase. When the climate warms up once more modern human-made objects will show up in the archaeological record. According to one investigation, huge animals were scarce in the cold, dry grassland as well. The specialist hunters known as Neanderthals would have struggled to survive in the absence of large prey. In contrast to earlier cold periods, modern humans were moving from the Near East into Europe at this time, and they were living in the southern refugial zones. Neanderthal populations, which were already sparse, rapidly decreased as a result of being confined to the tundra and unable to hunt their huge prey. Finally, 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals became extinct. As the temperature began to be more favorable again 40,000 to 35,000 years ago, modern humans moved from the southern borders into the center of Europe and soon occupied the now empty landscape. Even while this scenario seems persuasive, numerous issues still need to be resolved. One of the most resilient human species was the Neanderthal, which endured more than 300,000 years of climatic fluctuation. It appears that in the past they were able to adjust to changes in both the environment and prey numbers. In contrast to today's tundra, the Ice Age grassland was a nutrient-rich environment capable of supporting sizable herds of herbivores, including mammoths, horses, and reindeer. Between 24,000 and 21,000 years ago, during the height of the most recent Ice Age, massive ice sheets covered much of North America and northern Europe, and mountain ranges like Africa's Mount Kilimanjaro and South America's Andes were completely covered in glacier. At that time, our Homo sapien ancestors had migrated from the warm core of Africa into the severely affected northern European and Eurasian latitudes. Though physically almost identical to us, these early modern humans survived and even thrived in their tough environments because of their large, inventive brains and sophisticated tools and equipment.